Hi, and welcome to Audio and Acoustics with Norman Varney. Today we're going to talk about 7 reasons why you might not be able to discern the differences between audio cables. We're going to talk today about why they sound different, how they sound different, due to how they react to electronics, how they're made, and we're going to talk about what you should be listening for. Now, understand that most people don't have a proper playing field in the first place to hear these small differences. They are small differences, and you've got to have conditions have to be just right in order to hear these small differences. Most of you will discover that a reason or two in this list why you might not be able to hear the differences, and you'll learn what to be listening for. Okay, a little background story before we get into the nitty-gritty. Personal experience. I built a dedicated listening space down in the basement, so it's a room within a room. All the walls are isolated, the ceiling's floating, acoustical treatment, dimensions, everything is really well done. So after I constructed this, I wanted to set up the system quickly to listen to it. And I had some custom cables made at MIT, or they were being made at the time. They hadn't arrived yet. I had some good audiophile type speaker cable around. I used to have a store. For about 12 years, had a high-end store in Northern California. And this was back in the early 80s. We had monster cable, Kimber cable, oral symphonics, straight wire, things like that. And I could easily hear the different sonic signatures between those, and found that they worked better with some components other than others. So anyway, I had some good cable. This wasn't lamp cord. This was good cable. Wanted to hook up the system and listen to the room real quick. Did so. I was terribly disappointed. It sounded so awful, so uninvolving, flat and fatiguing. I wanted to cry, and I'm going, it really, can it be the room? It can't be that bad, can it? And we had all our acoustical treatment in there. I mean, I had measured it. It was like perfect. Really happy with the results. And here I am listening to it for the first time, and I'm totally underwhelmed. Well, then the MIT cables arrived, hooked those up. Oh my gosh, it sounded so good. It was such a difference. And I discovered what it was is I had some new amplifiers too. So with this new room, I got some new equipment. I got Coda Technologies amplifiers, ultra-wide bandwidth, high current capabilities. The cables that I was using was not a good match with them. Now, I learned a lot about electrons flowing through cable from my dad. My dad was an electrical engineer for Rockwell International from age 19 to age 65. He started working, I think the first planes he was working on were P-51 Mustangs. And he concluded, he was project electrical engineer on the B-1 bomber. And he told me before I was a teen about conductance and inductance, capacitance, different materials and how it affects the flow of cable and resistance and impedance and so forth. So I had a pretty good understanding of that. With that understanding, let's talk about the purpose of cable. There's 3 things. To transfer the signal with as little degradation as possible. 2, to conduct electrical energy with as little loss, storage, and interference as possible. And 3, to interface between the components with a good impedance match. So let's talk about how they sound different. A lesser quality cable or an impedance mismatch is going to sound flat, edgy, veiled, muddy. In other words, not smooth and open and dynamic. Why is that? Well, let's talk about the 4 parts of a cable. So you've got wire, And we all know that some materials, some metals, conduct electricity better than others. You've got the size or the gauge of the wire, the length of the wire. All those things have to do with how well electricity flows. You've got the dielectric or the insulation around the wires and how those are configured with the wires. You've got the shielding to reject any EMI or RFI. And then you've got the connector. And again, we know that you want a solid, clean connection. So the build quality of the cable, the materials that it's made of, and the configuration of those are all very different from different manufacturers, and they perform differently. So let's talk about some of the real basic test measurements you can make electronically on a cable. You can measure the frequency response across the whole audible bandwidth and see differences. Phase response, especially below about 50 hertz. Impedance, as we've talked about, resistance, capacitance, inductance, bandwidth, high frequency resonances above the audible bandwidth that has an effect down below, EMI and RFI rejection. In general, impedance mismatches are going to be the most audible, being perceived as fatiguing and flat, veiled, and edgy sounding. But any additional capacitance or inductance is going to alter the frequency and the phase response. Okay, so here are the 7 reasons why you may not be able to hear the differences between audio cables. Number 1 is the equipment you're listening through is subpar, or maybe one component in the chain of your system is performing not up to par, or maybe even performing not up to spec, has a problem of some kind. The second reason would be around setup, and I mean both electronically, calibration-wise, maybe the balance control is off, or physically, maybe you're off. Maybe you're not sitting in between the speakers properly, or maybe the speakers are not positioned the same distance from you, or maybe one is on a different angle than the other. So those are things that are going to destroy the possibilities of listening for sound images and depth and so forth. Third reason would be the acoustical environment is not up to par. And this could be noise in the background, so you can't hear those low-level details, or long reverberation times. There's too many hard surfaces in the room, and so noise is always, there's sound always there, and you can't hear the low-level details. They're being masked by the noise or the reverberation. Fourth would be your inexperience as far as ears and what to listen for. And again, like anything, if you don't know what to listen for, it's hard to, if you don't know what to focus on, it's hard to hear differences. And like anything, it requires experience. You have to experience excellence before you understand what it is. Another, or rather the fifth reason would be similar cables. If you've got 2 cables that are very similar in electrical characteristics, you're not going to be able to distinguish differences between them. Six might be a hearing deficiency that you have. And number 7 would be a combination of any of these other reasons. Now, remember again, most people have a reason or 2 or 3 of these that in their playing field, which is obscuring the possibility of them to be able to hear, to discern differences between audio cable. But when you do have a correct playing field, and all of these other things are addressed, you should be able to hear the differences. And now let's discuss what to listen for. So in general, you want to be listening for a smooth, open, big, and dynamic sound. But specifically first, let's listen for a smooth timbre from top to bottom, Second, a wide and deep sound stage. Third, easy focus on a specific instrument. Let's say you've got a bunch of instruments going on simultaneously. You want to be able to select any one of them and hear it on its own as if the others disappeared in its own space. You want to be able to hear both macro and micro dynamics. Little low-level details in attacks and decays. And listen for noise, interference, distortions, any, like we've talked about, hardness or edginess or metallic sounds or, grainy or sterile or analytical. And then 7, lastly, listen for it to sound fatiguing, especially as you crank it. If it sounds uncomfortable, then you're probably going down the wrong track. If the music starts to involve you and move you, then you're probably going down the right track. So now that you know what to listen for, I hope that you'll, and what to address so that you have a good playing field, I hope that you'll be able to address those issues and try out some new cables. And I think you'll have fun doing so and enjoy it. Crank up your favorite album and hear it anew. I hope that you've enjoyed this video, and if so and want to hear more, please subscribe below.